Retro Now.
Hey, this is Catherine Tabor, Senator Padme Amidala from Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Stay on the light side.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this episode will feature part 2 of our recap of the news coming out of Star Wars Celebration Japan. Before we wrap up the news, Jay, remind everybody what our social media contacts are.
You got it. We are very easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield's down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, yeah, this is part 2. We gave our thoughts on some of the biggest stories that came out of Star Wars Celebration in episode 878, which was out on Friday. But we're going to hit some of the other things that was announced, and there's plenty of it. So if you want to hear our thoughts on the Grogu panel and the Star Wars Starfighter and Maul Shadow Lord, go check out 878. But we got some other things to pick up on here, starting with the Andor Season 2 panel, which featured Tony Gilroy, Diego Luna, Genevieve O'Reilly, Adria Arjona, Denise Gao, Kai Solar, and Alan Tudyk. So they got like the bulk of the key part of the cast of Andor for that. Yeah, of course, Andor has Season 2 since debuted on Disney Plus since this panel happened. But some of the things that came out of the panel were that we'll get to see the quote unquote birth of K2SO, some romance for Cassian and Bix, a wedding on Trendrilla. Spoiler alert, we got to see that. And then they noted how there was 140 sets used in the filming of Season 2 across 7 stages, 2 backlots, 24 different locations, 700 costumes, 156 creatures, 30 droids, and 4,100 visual effects shots. The panel also got interrupted by cosplayers as the One Way Out prisoners from Narkina 5, chanting One Way Out. And then they conclude the panel with the debut of episode 1 of Season 2, which by now we've all had an opportunity to see. So beyond that, Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna, the entire cast was on the Celebration Live Star Wars show, the live stage. I'm going to get this spit out in a second. They were on the live stage quite a bit over the course of the weekend. So you had ample opportunity to hear from them on this. What stood out to you the most about the Andor panel?
Well, as always, it's just so thrilling and also just wonderful to see how much these cast members truly treasure the experience that they had while filming and creating what truly is going to go down, I believe, as a work of art for Star Wars. And, just Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna specifically, because they were such a huge principal part of obviously the production and the writing and everything like that. And just how much of an emphasis that they put on how this is going to change the way that we're going to view everything going forward. And, we've heard Diego Luna say in the past that you're going to want to watch Rogue One right after this, and it's going to change the way that you look at it, and it's going to change the way that you see it, which part of me is like, but I don't want it to change the way I see it because I already love it. There's the way that it is. But another thing that really tickled me was Alan Tudyk, and just, technically, obviously he was there for Rogue One, but when he talked about getting the call, to come back as K2 and just all of his experiences with filming and, having the like the suit on and the stilts and the different things that they had to do to get the right shots and all of the things. And he's just such a joy to listen to, always. But another thing too that I thought was just super cool was, and I apologize, I don't know if they said this in the panel or if they said this on the live stage, but when Adria Arjona and Diego Luna were talking about doing the subtitles or the dub, for the Spanish version of
Hmm.
Andor, that they actually recorded their voices in their characters so that they said especially for Adria Arjona, who plays Bix, she said it was important for her because she wanted her family, when they watched the show, to be able to hear her voice as
Hmm.
Bix. And so, was that in the panel or was that on the live stage? I can't remember. I'm
Yeah,
probably mixing my metaphors here.
it probably doesn't matter. We're talking about all the Andor coverage at this point.
So,
So yeah.
yeah, but I just thought that was so cool. And also just Denise Gao, how she's just hilarious in real life, like you wouldn't think that
Uh-huh.
she was. It was such a jo This was probably one of my favorite ones to watch, quite honestly, of all the panels. It was for me anyways. I just thought it was really enjoyable. But what were your takeaways? What were your favorite parts?
Yeah, I didn't watch the panel from start to finish. I saw clips of it all weekend long on Instagram and elsewhere. And so, that's great. But and I think I saw all of Diego's appearances on the live stage, and he's such a treasure. He
Oh, yeah.
loves the fans. He loves having done Star Wars. He loved working with these actors. He's got, especially him and Alan Tudyk. Those two are so much fun
Oh,
together.
for sure.
But okay, I am trying to withhold judgment, but this whole discussion of witnessing the birth of K2SO, we've talked about this on and off over the past several months since we knew Andor season 2 was coming and K2SO was going to be in it. They did a comic one shot that covered all this. And I don't think they're just going to recreate that for Disney Plus. And that's fine. It's just there's still a kernel of resentment in me from when they set aside the expanded universe and called it Legends and
Mhm.
then told us everything going forward was going to matter, that everything was going to be
Right.
interconnected. And so now it seems like we have the very real possibility that they're going to completely disregard a source. I am trying to be careful because I also realize that I've forgiven some other cracks in that EU Legends veneer crossing over to canon in the past. I'm thinking notably of E.K. Johnson's Ahsoka book and then what they did with Tales of the Jedi
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
some other things like that. But it just is they can't have it both ways. And there are certain things that you can write off as point of view differences. But then there are when you completely rewrite a story, that's an issue. So again, I don't know what they've done, but with them actively talking about the birth of K2SO, maybe they do an alternate version of that story. It finds its genesis in that comic or whatever. But yeah, anyways, I don't want to overstate it because I haven't seen it, but there's just something about that leads me to believe that that comic is not going to count anymore. Now, here's the rub on that is that I'm thinking of like the Ahsoka conflict as an example. No one has ever said that the book is not canon anymore. There
Right.
is a presumption that what happened in Tales of the Jedi is the canon and that automatically overwrites the book. But that's an assumption carried over. Boy, I didn't really mean this to turn into an entire EU Legends versus canon conversation, but I just want to get this thing out and then we'll move on. Is that there's a presumption because that's the way it was under the old expanded universe that there was levels of canon and anything that contradicted the movies or that was on screen was not canon as so long as it didn't conflict with those things that was canon. We had G level canon and all, and it was a headache to get through there. But no such rule has been created for canon versus the rest of the expanded universe that we see in comics and books and the like right now. So
Mhm.
technically they're both still canon, but I don't like having the potential discrepancy.
Right, no, I'm totally with you, and for me too, I feel like what does that do for those creators that had a hand in giving us something like that one shot, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that was promised to be canon, and then all of a sudden turning around and potentially, and as you said, we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know for sure, but potentially, going against that or negating that in some way. And so that kind of puts us right back into the old EU, in that we had like all these concurrent sorts of stories that, oh, if you, read it from this author, you read it from this, timeline, that it might have been slightly different than it was here. So we're kind of, reverting back to that if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't particularly care for it. And I don't want us to be in a position where we are having to rely on other resources to determine what is canon, what's not on this. So
Right.
that when
Right.
because we like to talk about Star Wars, we like to theorize about Star Wars, and
Connect
we
threads.
still bring in some of our Legends influences onto those
Sure.
discussions when we speculate and we kind of talk about what things might be or what the influence might be. But if we are trying to tie things together, well, it's like, well, does this count or not? And and now trying to keep in mind is the difference between something that was on it was live action, or what was in a comic, and it's like, well, what can you trust? And that's just
Exactly.
that can be frustrating. All right, enough of that gripe. Let's move on. Anything else about us, Andor, grabbed your attention you want to discuss before we move on?
Oh, Kyle Solar too.
Yeah.
He just cracks me up. Like, he's so different than his character of Cyril.
Oh yeah.
And, and the entire conversation about his mom, and what we might see in season 2, which of course, by the time we recorded this, we've already seen a little bit of that, is just, it just is such a joy. Like, the entire cast is just such a joy.
It was weird seeing them outside of Star Wars costumes because
Right.
you can
Yeah.
tell how much makeup and costuming changes their appearances.
Exactly, especially Kyle Solar as Cyril. I mean,
He's not awkward.
2 totally different people.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, just the beard and the color of his hair. I mean,
yeah.
he's just, yeah, totally different.
Well, he's much more confident. I mean, he really,
Sure.
this demonstrates how well he played Cyril. Who's someone who didn't have that confidence, who was awkward, who was kind of sniveling after what he went through with his mother. And you see him up on stage, it's like, this guy's cool. he's
Exactly.
he's pretty laid back. He can joke around with everybody else. This is not his character from Andor at all. So
Exactly. And I have to say, when they went out, he and Denise Guff went out on stage, and they were talking, about their relationship in Andor and just Andor altogether. Somebody had a Kyle blanket, like a
yeah.
Cyril blanket, and then they all had like Kyle heads on sticks and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm gonna need one of those blankets. I just thought that was so funny. It just reminded me too of, with Jedi Fallen Order and the whole poncho thing.
Right, yeah. And I think that person ended up later getting a picture with what's his name, the actor who played um
Cal?
played Cal Kestis.
Yes, yes, he
Yeah,
did. Yep.
yeah,
I follow him on Instagram. He's a really cool cosplayer, just saying.
right. All right. Well, let's get to the Ahsoka panel. This featured Rosario Dawson, Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau. We got the news that season 2 starts filming this week. Of course, they were talking last week about it being next week, but we are now in next week. So it is now filming. They officially announced that Rory McCann is playing Baylan Skoll after Ray Stevenson passing. And it was really touching how Dave Filoni talked about that. He consulted Ray's family
Mhm.
and kind of got their blessing to do it. And just how important it was, because Baylan is kind of on a parallel journey to Ahsoka. He's another lost Jedi, and they needed to tell that story. So, we've known that Rory McCann has had that role now for a while. We did an entire episode of the news on it here, but that was pretty cool to see. Then we got some other news. They've been training for this movie for the past few months. We got the news about several characters are going to be in it. We've got our Rebels cast, so Hera, Ezra, Sabine, Zeb is going to feature more prominently, and we're getting apparently a lot more Chopper. It was kind of funny listening
Mhm.
to Dave be exasperated about that. But Admiral Akbar is going to be in season 2, and he's going to go head to head against Thrawn in this
That's
one.
exciting.
Yeah. We've got the return of Sabine's Lothcat, and we were introduced to the Loth Kittens.
Yes. Love it. You know that that's gonna sell tons and tons of
Oh yeah.
plushies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's one of those decisions that yeah, you kind of sit back and wonder is that a story reason or did they do that for marketing purposes? But
Right. Kinda like the
right.
porgs, you know?
Yeah, exactly. The Mortis gods from Clone Wars will have a presence, which is not surprising given the
Yeah.
end of season
Right.
1. I'm just curious what that presence will be. And then the news that Hayden Christensen will be returning as Anakin. It was greeted with a lot of fanfare. He joined the stage for that one.
He
And
did.
then we were told that there is going to be a giant war. They're putting the war in Star Wars with Ahsoka season 2. So, and then Rosario and Hayden and Dave, they were all on stage multiple times over the course of the weekend. Rosario really tickled me. At one point, she's like, "They don't tell me anything because I cannot be trusted." That has
Yes.
been such a joke for a long time because she let slip that Anakin was coming to Ahsoka, that Hayden Christensen
Right.
would be in it, and then she's blown a couple things. But when she was up there on that live stage, she just geeked out about Star
She
Wars. I mean,
did.
she wasn't just talking about Ahsoka. She was talking about Andor, and she was talking about how great the movies are. And at one point, she's like, she goes, "I hope you all got hours because I could start once I get started talking, I may not stop." I mean, she really had a good time up on that stage talking a whole lot of Star Wars.
She did. And, I'll be the first to admit, and I've said it before, that I was not super thrilled with the casting of Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. And it took me quite a while to warm up to not only just her portrayal of Ahsoka, but just what I felt like she might be bringing to the Star Wars table, so to speak. But she really impressed me at Celebration. And I think a lot of that comes down to what you were saying is that she truly seems like she's invested, not just in the character, but in the entire, universe of Star Wars, the entire, storytelling, the entire mythos, the entire, she's really tried to embody who and what Ahsoka is.
Hmm.
And, I just was really tickled to hear her talking about her training and, working with her left hand and how she had gotten a little out of practice. And she's like, oh, darn, why did I stop practicing? And I should never have stopped practicing. But then she also talked about things like just hints of, and the Leku are getting longer. And she talked about how they really tried to, and of course, this is me geeking out about the cosplay aspect of it, but trying to make sure that the headpiece it's a lot lighter this time. It's like 3D printed frame with she's like, it's so soft. She says, I was just sitting there like stroking my hair, and it was just so soft. So that I'm excited to see those kinds of things too, and how those sorts of decisions costume wise have evolved. But I just thought what really also hit me was the whole idea of the parallel journey
Hmm.
from Ahsoka to Baylan Skull. And, I kind of picked up on that the first time around. Like he was kind of this lost Jedi, with Shin Hati and everything. But to hear it put that way really frames it differently for me. And
Hmm.
I'm really, really excited to see that. And of course, the idea that Dave said a lot more Hera
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
me very happy too. So, and
Yeah.
always Hayden. Hayden always makes me happy. So,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. One of the stories that I think it was Rosario that talked about, I think she was talking about Amanis Fonde playing Ezra, and apparently before there was even a thought of doing a live action Ahsoka, and that Ezra would even be in it, he saw Ezra on Rebels and told his agent, "I'm going to play that character someday." when,
that's
when,
awesome.
yeah, when he's in live action, I'm going to get that role. And so as soon as that came around that was a possibility, they went after it and he got it. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And a couple of the different actors have remarked on how he is Ezra.
Yeah.
He's such a natural in that role, and he did a fantastic job with it in season 1. So
Mhm. He
I'm really
did.
looking forward to seeing him side by side with Hera in season 2.
Yes.
And this wasn't anything that was discussed during the panels, but now that he's back, I'm just wondering if he'll have the opportunity to maybe do some training with Jason Sundula.
Mhm. That was my thought exactly. Yep. And I think we've
So,
actually talked about that before.
yeah.
And I know I had seen him at Imanis Fadi at was it Fan Expo Cleveland last year, I believe. and just the excitement that he brings to the role as well, and just the embodiment that he brings, as you said, just as Ezra. So, yeah, it's a great cast. It really is.
Yeah, this can't get here soon enough. Next, I can't remember if they said it's coming next year or not. They said it goes into production, but they give these things such long lead time.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be late next year or maybe a 2027 thing. But when would you do it around the Star Wars Starfighter movie? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how exactly when they end up releasing that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we could talk a whole lot more about Ahsoka, but we got a lot of other news to get through. So let's move on. They had a feature panel for Star Wars Visions for Volume 3, and we got the official date that is coming out on October 29th of this year. But then they, I should back up. I watched this panel on the live stream, but it was kind of difficult because a lot of it was in Japanese, and they were not providing a translation. Did you
Right.
watch any of that?
Like you, I tried, and I stuck with it for a pretty decent amount of time, but then
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna get the news
Yeah.
elsewhere, and I'll get the gist of it. So yeah, I hate to say it that way, but I was in the same boat that you were.
Right. Ended up doing something else. I had it on the background while I did something else, and then occasionally something would happen in English, and I was able to pick up on it. But the big news that came out of that, after they kind of previewed all the new stories that were coming back, they had a few returning stories, and then they previewed some new ones. But we are getting a spinoff, and it's called Star Wars Visions Presents The Ninth Jedi, and this is going to be a mini series spinning off from the Ninth Jedi story from season 1 of Visions. It's been a while since I've watched that, but I do remember that being one of the stories that I liked. And
Mhm.
so this is intriguing. It's going to feature Kara, whose father is a lightsaber smith. I'm not sure exactly what you
Mhm.
call someone who builds lightsabers. The lightsabers he builds change color depending on the force that the user is wielding. So light side blue, red side, dark side red, and the like. And then he gets kidnapped, and she goes after him there. So that's an interesting thought. I kind of like that. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would have had a series on the Ronin, but based off the duel from season 1. But hey, this was a good story too.
No, I agree, and I think that this was collectively one of the favorite manga stories, from Star Wars Vision
Mhm.
in season 1, so I guess, that does make sense that they would try to elaborate on that and do a little bit of a spinoff. I mean, I'm definitely here for it, and like you, I remember that being one of my favorites as well.
Right, right. So again, look for Volume 3 Visions this October, and then the Ninth Jedi sometime next year. We also got the announcement of a sequel to Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. This one's called Pieces of the Past. This was announced on the Star Wars live stage by by Ahmed Best in one of his many appearances on there. He had
Yeah,
so much fun at Celebration.
he
He
did.
he really enjoyed getting up there. Like I said, he was on the live stage all 3 days, and then he did the sidekicks panel, which I only got to see a little bit of it as well. But during the announcement of this sequel, he also announced that Darth Jar Jar is going to be available in Fortnite, which I don't play Fortnite, but the idea of being able to play Darth Jar Jar in that game just made me laugh.
Yes.
But yeah, and he's really in to Darth Jar Jar. Apparently, he's
Mhm.
all about that fan theory and has bought into it completely. And that was one of the things that got him so excited to rebuild the galaxy in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, he was having a ton of fun.
Then they went on to talk more about this Pieces of the Past sequel, and we get some notable characters that'll appearing, including Jackson, who's going to be voiced by Ben Schwartz, who's recently done the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, a brick-built Chewbacca, which is a set that has 2,000 pieces, and Brickhead's Ahsoka. So think of a cross between a Star Wars minifig and a Funko Pop, and you get the
Yeah.
Brickheads characters,
It's a good
uh,
way to put it.
which will be voiced by none other than Ashley Eckstein, who also came out
Yeah.
on the live stage to talk about this, and she was carrying the Brickhead's Ahsoka when she did.
Mhm.
This will be coming to Disney Plus on September 19th, 2025. So I don't know about you, Jay. For me, the Rebuild the Galaxy Lego special was, a fun comedic look at an alternate Star Wars universe that you can't take too seriously. And
Mhm.
so I'll watch this. This will be fun to get this fall.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just think I really enjoyed the last time that we had gone through this and rebuilt the galaxy. And yeah, Ashley was so excited. I mean, she was just full of joy at being able to come back and actually voice Ahsoka again. And I have to admit though, I had to look up what a brickheads is. Your
Mhm.
description is spot on, but I didn't realize that it was for, younger kids or people that just don't want to take a long time to do a build, and these are put together in about 10 to 15 minutes. So it's
Oh yeah.
just an easy little kit kind of a thing. And yeah, and they're very blacky and very, distorted, and definitely doesn't look exactly like you would imagine a Lego Ahsoka to look, but that's what the brick heads are. So it makes sense.
Yeah, they're actually pretty popular with more people than just kids. I know a lot of people that will collect those the way they collect Funkos and
Okay.
the like. So yeah, I
Good
mean,
to know. Yeah.
I just built the Star Wars UFC TIE Interceptor this past weekend,
Mm-hmm.
nearly 2,000 pieces, and that was way longer than a 15-minute build. And as much as I enjoyed that, about 2 hours into it, I was like, why didn't I pick a set that had like closer to 500 pieces? But the set looks amazing. I'm glad I did it.
It
But yeah, every
does.
once in a while, it's just fun to do a quicker build on things as well. And those are small; they don't take up a whole lot of space. You can collect a whole bunch of them, like I said, with Funkos. So
Yeah.
all right.
Very cool.
Yeah, the other thing about that, no, there's nothing else about that. Yeah, but Ashley Eckstein was back, and she really enjoyed the opportunity to voice Ahsoka again. She talked about how she was crying when she got offered that. So
Mm-hmm.
happy for Ashley. Look, this is not Celebration news, but it came out at about the same time, and I've seen this reported in the likes of Hollywood Reporter and a few other similar rags. But there is apparently some buzz going around that a new Star Wars series is in development by from Carlton Cuse and Nick Cuse. I had no idea who these people were until I looked them up. Carlton Cuse was the showrunner for Lost, alongside Damon Lindelof, who worked on that. He's also done work on Bates Motel, The Strain, and the Jack Ryan series. And Nick Cuse is his son, who's worked on Watchmen, The Leftovers, Station 11, and Masters of Air. So this series is in early development. There's not any real news about what it's about, but given the sources that are reporting, it's something to keep your eye on, I suppose. But I didn't watch Lost, and I'm not really familiar with these other shows other than I've heard the names before. But what, if anything, does this mean to you?
Right now, like you, I'm not super familiar with any of these shows. I've heard of some of them, but that's about the extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is really kind of surprising timing. Number one, given all of the news that just came out of Celebration and all of the confirmed things that we know that are coming, that, it's not that we ever really needed breadcrumbs to keep our set, excitement high for Star Wars, but it just seems like a weird time to be dropping breadcrumbs.
Well, here's the thing. This could have been an insider that may not have been authorized to release this information that told these sources about it. So
Mhm.
it's not an official release from Lucasfilm. And to me, that's actually kind of encouraging because we've gotten burned so many times about the announcements of all these movies that are
Mhm.
supposedly coming and then they never show up. I noticed that
Yep.
Patty Jenkins was not included amongst the Star
Right.
Wars movies that are still in development at this point. And
Mhm.
last time we heard from her, she was saying, I now owe Lucasfilm a script for the Rogue Squadron movie, which, considering that we now have a Star Wars Starfighter, I'm wondering if that is actually going to happen at all. There's even a possibility that they go back to
Mhm.
that. So
Mhm. Mhm.
there's just that as well. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that I find is that, we've been kind of talking about lately, there's not much on the horizon that we know about for Disney Plus. And by that, I mean, Ahsoka is after Andor season 2, which we're got right now. We know they're filming Ahsoka season 2 right now, but we don't know anything live action after that.
Right.
So this is, I guess, is just kind of encouraging that we may have something on the horizon for
Mhm.
2027. I don't know when it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Once again, our cup runneth over and just keeps going.
All right.
We'll see.
Well, we got one last story, and that is in the realm of video games. We had the announcement of Star Wars Zero Company, and it is described as such: command an elite squad through a gritty and authentic story in Star Wars Zero Company, a single-player turn-based tactics game developed by BitReactor in collaboration with Respawn Entertainment and Lucasfilm Games. Set in the twilight of the Clone Wars, you will step into the shoes of Hawks, a former Republic officer who leads Zero Company, an unconventional outfit of professionals for hire hailing from across the galaxy. Hawks and Zero Company are recruited for operations that pits them against the emerging threat that will consume the galaxy if left unchecked. To succeed, Hawks will lead a team of uneasy allies who must set aside their differences to overcome nearly impossible odds. Each decision you make could be the difference between life and death for Zero Company. Recruit a dynamic squad of both authored and custom characters to tackle high-stakes battles and defeat your opponents. The key to success will be the bonds forged on the battlefield that turn the tide of battle in your favor. The fight is won both on and off the battlefield. Between missions, develop a base of operations and deploy informants to new and iconic locations across the galaxy. Leverage your intel to navigate the conflicts of the Clone Wars and stay one step ahead of your adversaries. And it will be coming in 2026 to PC, PlayStation 5, and the Xbox Series X and S. So this looks promising. I can't tell exactly from the trailer that they had online. They're saying turn-based tactics. The gameplay kind of looked like what I've seen in Baldur's Gate 3 on this, but I don't know if it necessarily contains the same role-playing element or not. But interesting set of characters. Looked like they included a Mandalorian, a Jedi, various other archetypes that we've seen, clone trooper, the like. What'd you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it looks cool. The trailer was, the graphics and everything look pretty intense. Reminds me of like the Star Wars version of Guardians of the Galaxy. You have
Yeah.
all these like different mercenaries and whatnot coming together. And like you said, they're sort of a ragtag bunch and ones that you wouldn't necessarily think that would be put together. But it seems like it's going to offer a lot of really fun gameplay and also, offer some opportunities for the gamer to, make some fun decisions along the way too. So,
Indeed.
mm,
Indeed. So
mm.
I am guessing we'll get a lot more about this as we get through this year and into next year, and they start taking pre-orders and probably give you some sort of deluxe edition of the game and the like. That's just how they tend to go with games nowadays, especially if they have a big franchise attached to them. So,
Oh yeah.
all right. Well, that's it. We've done it. We've covered most
Woohoo.
of the news from Star Wars Celebration Japan. We'll probably be hitting up some things again as we get more details over the next several weeks and we get into the convention season this summer with things like San Diego Comic-Con, and I think they're doing a D23 type of experience out of Orlando. So plenty of opportunities to develop these stories further. So stick around and we'll cover those when they come up. But with that said, thank you for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and part 2 of our discussion of Star Wars Celebration Japan. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, consider subscribing to the podcast if you haven't done so already. And once you've done that, we'd love it if you could rate and review the show. 5 stars are always appreciated. And then if you want more Podcast Stardust beyond what you're going to find on your podcatcher, head over to retrozapp.com and you can find the entire catalog of all previous 879 shows, as well as the other great shows that are on the network. Jay, you want to remind everybody what those social media contacts are again and where else we can be found online?
You got it, Dennis. We are very easily and conveniently found at Podcast Stardust on all of your socials, including Facebook and Instagram. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest boards. And we do have our 2 YouTube outlets, including YouTube Music as well as the traditional YouTube. So please subscribe to those and share those out with your friends because that really does help to make us grow. And you can also tell us what your favorite parts of Celebration Japan were and what you're most looking forward to on those as well. And then we also have our TeePublic store where you can purchase one of 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of things from t-shirts and sweatshirts and home goods. And if you would like to get something, just hit up the link in our show notes. And if you do pick anything up, just keep in mind that every one of those purchases does help to support the show.
All right. We'll remind everybody what you got going on in cosplay.
You got it. So always on my Instagram, you can catch me at j.snipscosplay. I did actually just do a reel that used a little bit of Dave saying we're going to see a lot more Hera. And then, of course, I went into some of my cosplay as Hera from Ahsoka. And I'm also Hera from Rebels, as well as Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, and original concept Mandalorian, the Fourth Sister, and all kinds of fun things. So I've got a couple of appearances coming up here in May. So you can check out my stories and my feed for that once again at j.snipscosplay.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we are discussing episodes 4 through 6 of season 2 of Andor. And then on Monday, we'll be getting into news to the extent that there is any after Celebration Japan. We'll find out.
We'll see.
Yeah. But hopefully there will be. We'll see what comes up. But with that said, thanks for listening to episode 880 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.